The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, an audiobook adaptation. Welcome. What you are about to hear is not a philosophy, a morality, or a self-help guide. It is a mirror. It reflects the world as it has always operated, in the courts of ancient China, in the halls of Renaissance Italy, in the boardrooms and back rooms of the modern world. Power has its own grammar, its own laws, and for 3,000 years those laws have remained unchanged. Robert Greene spent years studying the most powerful, most cunning, most dangerous figures in human history. He distilled what he learned into 48 laws. Some of these laws will disturb you. Some will excite you. All of them will make you see the world differently. This is their story. Preface. The game that never ends. The feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable. When we feel helpless, we feel miserable. No one wants less power. Everyone wants more. And yet, in the world we inhabit today, it has become dangerous to seem too power-hungry, to be overt with your power moves. We must appear fair, decent, democratic, and so we must be subtle, congenial yet cunning, democratic yet devious. Throughout history, the game of power has always been played in the shadows. The courtiers who surrounded kings and queens could not simply seize power by force. They had to outmaneuver their rivals without appearing to try. They had to serve their masters while plotting against their peers. They had to smile at those they despised. They had to seem the very model of civility while maneuvering with the ruthlessness of generals. The world has changed. The courts are gone, but the game endures. Today we face the same paradox that confronted the courtier. Everything must appear civilized, fair, and decent, but those who take those rules too literally, those who refuse to play, are crushed by those who do not share their scruples. As Machiavelli wrote, "Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good." The game is not optional. You are already in it. The only question is whether you play it well or poorly. Robert Greene's 48 laws are drawn from more than 3,000 years of history, from Bismarck and Napoleon, from Sun Tzu and Machiavelli, from Casanova and the great con artists, from queens who outmaneuvered kings, and servants who outlasted emperors. Each law comes with a warning. These are not just tools of advancement, they are also traps into which the unwary fall. Learn the laws to use them. Learn the transgressions to avoid them. Power is a game. The better you understand the rules, the less likely you are to become someone else's piece on the board. Part 1. The Art of the Courtier. Never outshine, never offend, never be seen trying. Law 1 of 48. Never outshine the master. The year is 1661. France. Nicolas Fouquet, finance minister to the young King Louis XIV, is the most powerful man in the kingdom after the king himself, and he makes one catastrophic mistake. He throws a party. Not just any party, the most spectacular gathering the world had ever seen. The gardens of his chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, were lit by 6,000 candles. Molière wrote a play for the occasion. The finest noblemen of Europe attended, and at the center of it all was King Louis XIV, the guest of honor. Fouquet believed the party would demonstrate his loyalty, his taste, his indispensability. He believed it would win back the king's favor. Instead, with every magnificent spectacle, every course of exotic food, every fountain display, every burst of fireworks, Louis saw one thing, that his finance minister had more grandeur than the king himself. 3 weeks later, Fouquet was arrested. He spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement in the most isolated prison in France. Louis, meanwhile, hired the same architects, the same gardeners, the same artists, and built Versailles. Never let yourself outshine those above you. Make them feel brilliant, and you will be indispensable. Make them feel dim, and you will be destroyed. The lesson is ancient and universal. Galileo, that most brilliant of scientists, understood it perfectly. When he discovered the moons of Jupiter, he did not merely publish his finding. He named the moons after the Medici family, declared that the heavens themselves were aligned in their honor, and presented his discovery as a cosmic tribute to their greatness. Within months, Cosimo II made him court philosopher, with a full salary. Galileo did not outshine his master. He used his brilliance to make his master shine. All superiority is odious, but the superiority of a subject over his prince is not only stupid, it is fatal. Baltasar Gracian, 1601 to 1658. Law 2 of 48. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Picture the throne of the Byzantine Empire, 9th century. A young emperor, Michael III, needs a trusted counselor. He passes over the most qualified man available and chooses instead his dearest friend, a stable master who saved his life. His name is Basilius. Michael showered Basilius with gifts. He educated him, ennobled him, gave him rank and wealth. He made him the second most powerful man in the empire. And Basilius, that peasant boy transformed by imperial generosity, repaid this loyalty by having Michael stabbed to death in his bed, then riding through the streets of Byzantium with his former benefactor's head on a pike. The lesson here is brutal, but Robert Greene insists it must be absorbed. Friends, precisely because they are friends, are uniquely positioned to betray you. They know your weaknesses. They carry expectations. They become comfortable, then entitled, then resentful. The very closeness that made them valuable becomes the source of their venom. Enemies are different. Emperor Sung of China understood this. Instead of eliminating his rivals, he bought them off, removed them from power with generous estates, and then converted his most dangerous opponents into loyal subjects by sparing their lives when he could have taken them. A man suddenly pardoned from death becomes the most grateful ally imaginable. He has everything to prove and nothing to hide. Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends? Abraham Lincoln, in response to a critic who wished him to destroy his Southern enemies. Law 3 of 48. Conceal your intentions. Ninon de L'Enclos was 62 years old when the young Marquis de Sévigné came to her for advice on seduction. He had been transparent in his pursuit, too obvious, too earnest, too easily read. And so the countess he courted had grown bored. Ninon's lesson was simple. Never let your target know what you want. Confusion is not the enemy of desire, it is its fuel. She instructed the Marquis to appear indifferent, to pretend interest in other women, to be present, then mysteriously absent, to never, under any circumstances, announce his love. The Marquis followed her instructions faithfully for weeks. The Countess became intrigued, jealous, fascinated. She was on the verge of surrendering, and then the Marquis, unable to contain himself, looked into the Countess's eyes and told her directly that he loved her. The spell shattered instantly. The door closed. It never opened again. The moment your intention is visible, it can be resisted. Keep people guessing, and they cannot defend themselves. Otto von Bismarck understood this at the political level with terrifying clarity. In 1850, when the Prussian parliament was hungry for war with Austria, Bismarck, a man who dreamed of nothing more than crushing Austria and unifying Germany, stood up and gave a passionate speech for peace. He praised Austria. He spoke of the madness of war. The king, grateful, made him a minister. Years later, from that position of power, Bismarck led Prussia into a war against Austria that humiliated the former empire and united Germany under Prussian leadership. He had wanted it all along. No one had known. Conceal your purpose and hide your progress. Do not disclose the extent of your designs until they cannot be opposed. Ninon de L'Enclos. Law 4 of 48. Always say less than necessary. Coriolanus was Rome's greatest soldier. His battlefield record was legend. His scars were proof of 17 years fighting for the Republic. When he finally entered politics, the crowd wept at his wounds, and his election seemed certain. Then he opened his mouth. He boasted. He insulted. He mocked his opponents. He delivered speech after speech revealing exactly what he thought of democracy, of the common people, of anyone who disagreed with him. With every word he spoke, the legend shrank. The hero became a braggart. The mystique dissolved. The people turned against him so completely that they not only denied him election, they eventually voted to throw him from the Tarpeian Rock. Louis XIV ruled for more than half a century, and he did so largely through silence. When courtiers brought him complex arguments, he would listen attentively, then say only, "I shall see." Nothing more. Weeks later he would act, and no one had been able to anticipate his decision, because he had never revealed his reasoning. The king's silence kept everyone around him anxious, attentive, perpetually off balance. It is impossible to argue against a man who says nothing. It is impossible to manipulate a man whose thoughts you cannot read. The less you say, the more powerful you appear. The more you say, the more you reveal, and the more ammunition you hand to your enemies. When you are trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear. Powerful people impress by saying less. Law 5 of 48. So much depends on reputation, guard it with your life. Zhuge Liang was China's greatest general. His reputation was so formidable that when an enemy army of 150,000 soldiers approached the small town where he rested with only a handful of men, he did not flee or fight. Instead, he sat on the city wall in plain sight, wearing a Taoist robe, playing a lute, and singing calmly as the vast army approached. The enemy commander, Sima Yi, recognized Liang immediately. He studied the scene, the open gates, the unarmed general, the serene music, and he ordered an immediate retreat. He was convinced it was a trap, that only a man of supreme confidence could sit so calmly in the face of 150,000 soldiers. His reputation had made the general untouchable without a single sword being drawn. Reputation is a fortress, built over years and destroyed in moments. A single scandal, a single visible failure, a single act of weakness can crack a reputation that took decades to construct. And once it cracks, the cracks spread. Those who once feared you sense an opening. Those who once respected you begin to doubt. And those who hated you but stayed silent now feel emboldened to speak. Guard your reputation as if your life depends on it, because in the world of power, it does. The wisest players know to attack reputation before confronting enemies directly. Undermine how others see your rival, and you diminish them without ever raising a hand. Meanwhile, make your own reputation so ironclad, so consistent, so unmistakably powerful that it precedes you into every room and does half your work before you arrive. Law 6 of 48. Court attention at all costs. In the world of power, being noticed is not vanity. It is survival. The person who is not seen is not considered. The person who is not considered is not feared. The person who is not feared has no power at all. P.T. Barnum built an empire on this principle. He understood that it is far better to be talked about, even negatively, even controversially, than to be ignored. He manufactured spectacles that drew crowds, provoked arguments, and kept his name on everyone's lips. His museum burned down twice. Each time the rebuilding was itself a news story. He could not stop being talked about because he never stopped being interesting. The same principle governed the great courtiers of history. Standing out in a court full of ambitious nobles required a signature, something memorable. Something that made people think of you when a problem arose or an opportunity appeared. The person who blends into the crowd disappears from the minds of those with the power to elevate or destroy. Familiarity breeds comfort. Comfort breeds neglect. And neglect, in the world of power, is a slow death. Make yourself distinct. Create an image, a myth, a presence that people cannot stop thinking about. Better to be monstrous than mediocre. Better to be controversial than invisible. Law 7 of 48. Get others to do the work, but always take the credit. This law is not about laziness. It is about leverage. The greatest generals in history did not personally carry swords into battle. They arranged their forces, understood the terrain, and let the structure of their plan do the heavy lifting. The credit, inevitably, was theirs. Nikola Tesla was perhaps the most brilliant inventor of the 19th century. He worked for Thomas Edison, and it was Tesla's genius that made many of Edison's greatest achievements possible. But Edison understood something Tesla did not. The work matters less than the name attached to it. Edison took the credit. Tesla died in poverty. Use the knowledge, the effort, and the legwork of those around you. Build systems, delegate execution, and make yourself the face of the outcome. This is not theft, it is strategy. The world is full of talented people who lack the cunning to position themselves at the center of their own work. Be positioned there, and take care to give just enough visible credit to your collaborators to keep them motivated, while ensuring your name is the one that history remembers. Law 8 of 48. Make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. In every negotiation, every confrontation, every contest of wills, the person who is forced to move first is at a disadvantage. They reveal their hand. They show their need. They betray their urgency. And urgency, in the game of power, is weakness. Napoleon understood this. He would often feign retreat, drawing enemies into territory of his choosing, then surround and destroy them. The bait was the illusion of an easy victory. The trap was everything else. In your own life, resist the temptation to chase. Let others come to you. This requires patience, perhaps the most difficult skill in the power player's arsenal. But the rewards are immense. When people come to you, they come on your terms. They have already invested effort. They have already signaled their desire. And desire, once signaled, is halfway surrendered. Control the ground on which the contest takes place, and you have already won half the battle. Law 9 of 48. Win through your actions, never through argument. Argument is the least efficient tool for changing minds. It activates pride. It entrenches positions. It transforms disagreements into personal conflicts. Even when you win an argument, even when you are demonstrably, unambiguously correct, you leave your opponent humiliated, and humiliated people do not forget. Demonstrate. Do not debate. Show the world what you are capable of through action, and let others draw their own conclusions. Conclusions they reach themselves are conclusions they believe. Conclusions forced upon them are conclusions they resent. The great statesman Bismarck did not argue for German unification. He created the conditions that made it inevitable. The great scientists of history did not persuade their colleagues by shouting louder. They produced evidence so overwhelming that resistance became intellectually untenable. Actions speak in a language that no argument can counter. They are permanent, visible, undeniable. Law 10 of 48. Infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. Misery is contagious. This is not a metaphor, it is a documented psychological reality. The people around us shape our emotions, our habits, our trajectories. Spend enough time with the bitter and the defeated, and their bitterness seeps into you. Spend time with those who are energized, curious, and successful, and something of that quality transfers. This is not a counsel of cruelty, it is a counsel of survival. You cannot save everyone, and attempting to drag the chronically unlucky, the constitutionally miserable, or the fundamentally destructive into a better state will exhaust you without helping them. They will pull you down before you can lift them up. Judge people not by their intentions, but by their effect. Some people, however charming in individual moments, leave everyone around them worse off over time. Identify them early. Protect yourself from them swiftly. Associate with the energizing. Quarantine yourself from the draining. Your environment shapes you more than you know. Part 2. The Architecture of Dependence. Make yourself necessary. Make others weak. Law 11 of 48. Learn to keep people dependent on you. Independence is not the goal of the power player. Dependence is. The moment people no longer need you, your power over them disappears. The moment they can replace you easily, you become disposable. The goal is to make yourself so uniquely useful, so irreplaceable, so embedded in the machinery of others' lives that removing you would cause the whole structure to collapse. Machiavelli observed this in the princes of his era. The most secure rulers were those who possessed skills or knowledge that no one else could replicate. When the knowledge died with them, it could not be transferred to a rival. Their secret was their survival. This applies equally in modern life. Be the person who knows things no one else knows. Cultivate relationships that cannot be easily replicated. Make yourself the indispensable link in chains of connection and consequence, and guard carefully against making others too dependent on you in ways that will eventually make them resent you. Dependence without dignity breeds rebellion. Law 12 of 48. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. A single act of genuine generosity can undo years of suspicion. A single moment of apparent honesty, of seeming to reveal something vulnerable or unflattering about yourself, can open doors that remained sealed for years of careful negotiation. The con artist Joseph Weil, known as the Yellow Kid, understood this better than anyone. Every elaborate deception he ran began with an act of apparent candor. He would lean in close to his mark, lower his voice, and share a secret that was, of course, entirely manufactured. But the intimacy of the gesture, the apparent trust it implied, dissolved the mark's defenses instantly. Use honesty as a tool. Deploy generosity strategically. A perfectly timed gift, a perfectly placed concession, a perfectly chosen moment of apparent vulnerability, these are not weaknesses, they are weapons. The person who seems most honest in a dishonest world wields the most power. Law 13 of 48. When asking for help, appeal to self-interest, never mercy. People rarely do things out of pure kindness. They do things because doing those things serves them, because the action satisfies a need for validation, reciprocity, self-image, or advancement. When you ask for help by appealing to another person's mercy or gratitude, you are putting the entire weight of your request on an emotion that is unreliable, easily exhausted, and deeply resented. When you ask for help by showing another person what they stand to gain, you are aligning your interest with theirs. You are making your success their success. You are transforming a favor into a partnership. Study the person you need help from. Understand what they want, not what they say they want, but what their actions reveal they truly desire. Frame your request as the path to that desire. Make helping you feel like helping themselves. Self-interest is the most reliable engine in human nature. Learn to use it, and you will almost never be refused. Law 14 of 48. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. Information is power, and the richest veins of information are not found in public statements or official channels. They are found in unguarded conversations, in the casual remarks people make when they believe they are among friends, in the details that slip out when someone is comfortable. The great intelligence operatives of history were not remarkable for their cunning disguises or elaborate cover stories. They were remarkable for their social skills. They knew how to make people talk. They knew how to ask an innocent-seeming question that would reveal a dangerous truth. They knew how to listen with apparent warmth while actually cataloging every vulnerability. In social encounters, train yourself to observe. Ask indirect questions. Seem more interested in the other person than in advancing your own agenda. People love to be listened to, and as they talk, they reveal their fears, their resentments, their ambitions, their weaknesses. File it all away. Use it later. Law 15 of 48. Crush your enemy totally. This law is perhaps the most disturbing in the entire collection, and it is also, historically, the most consistently validated. Half victories are the most dangerous outcome in the game of power. An enemy who is wounded but not destroyed has time to recover, to nurse his grievances, to plan his revenge. The great leaders of history, from Caesar to Lincoln, from Sung to Elizabeth I, learned this lesson in blood. Those who showed mercy to a defeated enemy often found that enemy reconstituted and returned, more dangerous than before. Robert Greene is not advocating literal destruction here, though history is full of that too. He is advocating thoroughness. When you defeat a rival, do it so completely that there is nothing left to reconstitute. Leave no faction intact. Remove every resource they might use to rebuild. Do not let sentiment or the appearance of mercy lead you to leave embers that will eventually reignite. There is no mercy in the game of power, only strategy. An ember left unextinguished will eventually become a fire. Law 16 of 48. Use absence to increase respect and honor. Presence is precious only when it is scarce. A person who is always available becomes background noise. Their opinions are taken for granted. Their presence is expected rather than anticipated. Over time, familiarity does not breed contempt so much as indifference, which is its own quiet form of contempt. The great seducers of history understood this instinctively. Casanova did not overstay his welcome. He appeared, dazzled, withdrew, leaving his companions wondering, longing, replaying every moment of his presence and imagining the next. The withdrawal created desire. The desire created power. Know when to leave the room. Know when to be unreachable. Let your absence remind people what they have when you are present. And when you return, return with news, with energy, with something to offer, so that your arrivals become events rather than routines. What is rare is precious. Make yourself rare, and you become precious. Law 17 of 48. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Predictability is the foundation of control over you. When people can anticipate your reactions, they can manage you. They know which buttons to press, which lines to avoid, which approaches will succeed and which will fail. They have you mapped. Unpredictability dismantles that map. When no one can be certain of your next move, they cannot plan against you. They spend their energy anticipating rather than acting. They become reactive rather than proactive. And the person who controls the tempo controls the game. Louis XIV raised unpredictability to an art form. No one could predict when he would strike, what he would say, how he would respond. His ministers spent enormous energy trying to read him, energy that could not be directed against him. His inscrutability was a weapon more powerful than any army. The man who can be read like a book can be controlled like a puppet. Remain unreadable, and you remain ungovernable. Law 18 of 48. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. Power is social. It flows through relationships, alliances, and the constant exchange of favors, information, and presence. The moment you withdraw from that flow, the moment you build walls and retreat into isolation, you lose touch with the currents that sustain power. Many rulers throughout history have made this mistake. Fearing attack, fearing betrayal, fearing the complexity and unpredictability of human interaction, they surrounded themselves with fewer and fewer people, admitted less and less information, and gradually became blind to the very threats they had hoped to avoid. Isolated, they were easy to overthrow. Isolated, they never saw it coming. Stay engaged, stay visible. Maintain your network even when, especially when, you feel secure. The allies you neglect in times of strength will not be there in times of need. Law 19 of 48. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. Not all people are the same. Some will swallow an insult and move on. Others will carry it for decades, waiting patiently for the opportunity to repay it with interest. Some will forget a slight the moment you leave the room. Others will build their entire identity around making you regret it. The game of power requires the ability to read people before you move against them. Before you insult, before you maneuver, before you compete, study your opponent. Understand whether they are the type who will accept defeat graciously or the type who will spend years planning revenge. Understand whether they have the patience, the connections, and the ruthlessness to make that revenge effective. The wrong enemy, underestimated, can undo a lifetime of careful maneuvering. Know who you are dealing with before you make an enemy of them. Law 20 of 48. Do not commit to anyone. The most powerful position is that of the one who has not yet decided. Factions compete for your allegiance. Rivals court your favor. Everyone treats you carefully, knowing that you have not yet made your choice, and hoping that careful treatment will be rewarded with it. The moment you commit, your value to those around you changes. Those who wanted your allegiance needed your uncertainty. Once they have your loyalty, they no longer need to treat you with the same care. And those who lost your allegiance now have no reason to protect you. The great power player remains perpetually available, apparently open to persuasion, apparently movable, apparently uncommitted. This is not duplicity, it is freedom. It is the freedom to choose the best option available rather than being bound by the first option accepted. Independence is the foundation of power. Never mortgage it cheaply. Part 3. The Seduction of Appearances. How you seem is how you are. Choose your seeming wisely. Law 21 of 48. Play a sucker to catch a sucker. Seem dumber than your mark. Intelligence, openly displayed, makes people uncomfortable. It reminds them of their own limitations. It arouses envy. It puts them on their guard. But a person who seems slightly naive, slightly simple, slightly behind, arouses no such feelings. They relax. They become careless. And the supposedly simple person, watching carefully behind the mask of naivete, learns everything they need to know. Seem dumber than your mark. Let your intelligence be a weapon held in reserve, deployed only when the moment is right. Law 22 of 48. Use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. When you are weak, do not fight. Fighting a stronger opponent from a position of weakness is not bravery, it is waste. The outcome is already decided, and the only variable is how much damage you sustain in the losing. Instead, surrender. Not forever, strategically. Submit outwardly while planning inwardly. Let your opponent believe they have won, while you conserve your energy, study their methods, and wait for the moment when the balance shifts. In surrender, there is no shame, only strategy. Many of history's most remarkable comebacks began with a tactical retreat. The person who survives lives to fight another day. The person who dies fighting on principle dies on principle. The game requires survival above all else. The tree that bends in the storm survives. The tree that refuses to bend is torn from the ground. Law 23 of 48. Concentrate your forces. Spread yourself too thin, and you are nothing everywhere. The army that divides itself to fight on too many fronts defeats itself. The person who pursues too many goals achieves none of them. Power requires concentration, the patient, disciplined accumulation of force at a single point, held there until the point gives way. Find the richest mine available to you. Dig it deeply. Let others scatter across the landscape in search of new veins, while you extract everything of value from the vein you have already found. The dilettante will never match the master. The master is someone who has concentrated for long enough. Law 24 of 48. Play the perfect courtier. The perfect courtier is the consummate social player. They know how to flatter without appearing to grovel. They know how to disagree without offending. They know how to advance their own interests without ever appearing self-interested. They are always agreeable, always useful, always subtly positioning themselves closer to the source of power. The skills of the courtier are not sycophancy, they are strategy. To play the courtier perfectly is to be the person everyone finds delightful to be around, whose presence is always welcome, whose counsel is always sought. That person, over time, accumulates more power than any overt competitor. Charm is not decoration. In the game of power, it is armor. Law 25 of 48. Recreate yourself. The greatest power is the power over your own image. Most people accept the identity they were given, by family, by circumstance, by the accident of birth, and spend their lives playing a role they never chose. The person who understands power refuses this passivity. Recreate yourself. Decide who you want to be and build that person deliberately through the clothes you wear, the roles you play, the stories you tell about yourself, the persona you project. Julius Caesar was not born with the air of a god-emperor. He constructed it, piece by piece, performance by performance. The self is not fixed. It is a work in progress. The question is whether you direct the work or let others direct it for you. The most powerful people in history were, above all, the most deliberate actors. They chose their characters. They played them perfectly. Law 26 of 48. Keep your hands clean. Power requires dirty work. Alliances must be broken. Rivals must be undermined. Inconvenient truths must be buried. But the person who does this work openly, whose hands are visibly soiled, loses the aura of legitimacy that makes power sustainable. Use scapegoats. Use agents. Make others the visible instruments of your will while you remain behind the curtain, seeming above the fray. When things go wrong, as they inevitably will, others take the blame. When things go right, the credit quietly finds its way to you. This is not cowardice. It is sophistication. The person whose hands appear clean can operate indefinitely. The person covered in the evidence of their own machinations will eventually find their machinations turned against them. Law 27 of 48. Play on people's need to believe. Create a cult-like following. People hunger to believe in something larger than themselves. They want meaning, mystery, and the comfort of belonging to a cause. The person who can offer that hunger a home, who can position themselves as prophet, visionary, or guide, commands a loyalty that no salary or authority can buy. Keep your words vague, but full of promise. Be accessible enough to seem human, but distant enough to seem special. Cultivate the air of someone who knows things others do not. Offer people an identity, a sense of being part of something meaningful, and they will defend you, promote you, and follow you with a fervor that rational self-interest cannot explain. The power of belief is the most durable power in history. No army has ever conquered what a truly believed idea can sustain. Law 28 of 48. Enter action with boldness. Hesitation is the enemy of power. The tentative move, the half-committed strike, the qualified decision. These signal uncertainty, and uncertainty invites challenge. The bold move, even if imperfect, carries an authority that perfect timidity never achieves. Fear creates the very outcomes it hopes to avoid. The person who negotiates timidly, afraid to push too hard, signals that they can be pushed. The person who enters with confidence and demands the unreasonable often gets far more than the person who enters with modesty and asks for the reasonable. Study the great conquerors of history: Napoleon, Alexander, Catherine the Great. They were not always right. They were always decisive. And in a world of hesitating opponents, decisiveness alone was often sufficient to win. Boldness is magnetic. Hesitation is repellent. Choose accordingly. Law 29 of 48. Plan all the way to the end. Most people plan to the first obstacle. The great player plans to the final outcome and works backward from there, identifying every obstacle, every contingency, every potential reversal, long before they arrive. The thrill of beginning a plan, of imagining the success it will bring, is so intoxicating that many people stop there. They start without thinking through what happens when resistance appears. And when resistance appears, as it always does, they improvise. Improvisation in the middle of a complex plan is almost always a disaster. Plan further than your rivals. See more steps ahead, and when you act, act with the certainty of someone who knows exactly where each step leads, because you have already been there, in your mind, 100 times. Law 30 of 48. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. The moment you reveal how hard you work to achieve something, you destroy half the impression. Effort signals struggle. Struggle signals difficulty, and difficulty suggests that what you achieved was within reach of anyone willing to put in the same effort. The master disguises the years of practice behind an air of natural grace. Cary Grant did not look like he was performing. He looked like he was simply being himself. That effortlessness was the product of extraordinary discipline, practiced until it was invisible. Never complain about the cost of your achievements. Never explain the difficulty. Let the result speak, and let the result appear inevitable, as if it could not have been otherwise, as if you are simply the kind of person to whom such things naturally happen. Appear to do everything with ease, and people will assume greatness comes naturally to you, which means they will expect more from you, and expectation, met consistently, becomes reputation. Part 4. The Master Strokes. The laws that separate the merely clever from the truly powerful. Law 31 of 48. Control the options. Get others to play with cards you deal. True freedom of choice is rarer than it appears. The skilled power player does not leave outcomes to chance. They arrange the available options so that all roads lead to the same destination. The opponent believes they are choosing freely. In reality, they are choosing between versions of what the player wants. In negotiation, never present a single demand. Present multiple options, all of which are acceptable to you. The other party feels in control. They feel their agency has been respected, and you get what you wanted regardless of which option they select. Law 32 of 48. Play to people's fantasies. Truth is often unwelcome. Reality, with its constraints and disappointments, is not what people prefer. What people prefer is a vision, a beautiful, exciting, possible version of the world in which their deepest desires are achievable. The person who tells people what they want to hear will always have an audience. This is not cynicism, it is psychology. And the power player who can weave a compelling fantasy, who can offer people a story in which they are the heroes and their future is magnificent, commands a loyalty that realistic promises could never generate. Never appeal to truth when you can appeal to hope. Law 33 of 48. Discover each man's thumbscrew. Everyone has a weakness a pressure point, a vulnerability that, once found and applied, gives the person who found it enormous leverage. The weakness is rarely what people advertise. It is usually what they most carefully hide. Study the people around you, not their words, but their behavior. What makes them anxious? What do they pursue obsessively? What do they react to with disproportionate emotion? Beneath every strong personality is a soft spot. Find it. Not necessarily to exploit it, but to understand the full picture of who you are dealing with. Law 34 of 48. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. The way you carry yourself determines the way others perceive and treat you. People form their initial judgments based on appearance, posture, bearing, and the subtle signals of how much you seem to value yourself. Arrive seeming valuable, and people will treat you as valuable. Arrive seeming desperate, and desperation is what they will reflect back to you. Demand respect, not by asking for it, but by assuming it. Behave as though it is unthinkable that anyone would treat you with disrespect, and most people will treat you accordingly. It is only when you signal that disrespect is acceptable that it becomes common. Your self-image projects outward. Make it project power. Law 35 of 48. Master the art of timing. Power requires patience. The right move at the wrong moment is no different from the wrong move entirely. The person who acts too early reveals their hand before the conditions are ripe. The person who acts too late finds that the opportunity has been seized by someone else. Read the currents of the moment. Understand when conditions are shifting in your favor, and be ready to move decisively when they do. Meanwhile, during periods when the conditions are not yet right, do not act. Simply wait, observe, and prepare. The ability to wait without losing focus or resolve is one of the rarest and most powerful skills in the game of power. Law 36 of 48. Disdain. Things you cannot have, ignoring them is the best revenge. When you cannot have something, the worst response is to openly desire it. Visible desire gives that thing, and the person who controls it, power over you. Your longing becomes their leverage. Instead, affect indifference. Ignore the thing you cannot have. Treat it as beneath your attention. This does two things simultaneously. It deprives your opponent of the satisfaction of your visible suffering, and it signals to the world that you are above such deprivations, that your ambitions range higher and your position is secure enough that this particular loss is trivial. Law 37 of 48. Create compelling spectacles. The eye is faster than the ear. An image reaches deeper than an argument. A spectacle bypasses reason and speaks directly to emotion. The person who controls the imagery, the symbols, the stage, the ceremony, controls the emotional response of everyone who witnesses it. The great rulers of history understood that power must be performed as well as exercised. Louis XIV built Versailles not merely as a palace, but as a statement, a physical manifestation of power so overwhelming that rebellion seemed not just dangerous, but absurd. The architecture was the argument. Think in images. Create moments that people will remember and repeat. The story that gets told about you after you leave the room is more powerful than anything you could say while you are in it. Law 38 of 48. Think as you like, but behave like others. Nonconformity is expensive. The person who flaunts their unconventional ideas, who makes a show of being different, who performs their independence for an audience, invites resistance, resentment, and the organized opposition of those who feel implicitly criticized by the comparison. Think freely, think radically if you wish, but behave within the norms of your environment. Save your unconventional thinking for private action, for the strategic move that no one sees coming. Blend in on the surface. Innovate beneath it. The person who conforms socially while thinking independently has all the advantages of both positions. The access that conformity provides and the strategic edge that independent thinking produces. Law 39 of 48. Stir up waters to catch fish. Anger is a vulnerability. The person who loses their temper loses their clarity, their strategic judgment, their ability to see the board clearly. The skilled power player learns to use this, to deliberately provoke opponents into emotional reactions that cloud their thinking and expose their weaknesses. Meanwhile, the player who provokes remains calm, unruffled, watchful. While the opponent is consumed by anger, the player is noting exactly which nerve was struck, which pressure point produced the reaction, which wound is still raw enough to be reopened when the moment requires it. Stay calm while your opponents rage, and you will always see more clearly than they do. Law 40 of 48. Despise the free lunch. Nothing is truly free. What appears to be given without cost always carries a hidden obligation, a debt that will be called due at a moment chosen by the giver, not the receiver. The person who accepts too many gifts, too much generosity, too many apparent favors, accumulates a web of invisible obligations that will eventually constrain their freedom of action at the worst possible moment. Pay your own way whenever possible. This is not pride, it is independence. The person who owes nothing to no one moves through the world unburdened. Their decisions are their own. Their allegiances are chosen, not compelled. Their freedom is intact. Generosity is often the most elegant form of control. Accept it cautiously. Part 5. The Final Laws. The deepest truths about power and the wisdom to survive it. Law 41 of 48. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. The shadow of greatness is a dangerous place to build a career. The person who follows a legend is always compared unfavorably to that legend, not by the fair standard of their own achievement, but by the impossible standard of what the predecessor represented. They inherit not just the position, but the myth, and the myth is always more impressive than the reality. Find your own territory. Establish your own identity. Let the legend recede while you build something new that cannot be compared to what came before. Be the first in your domain rather than the second in someone else's. Law 42 of 48. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. In any group there is a source, a person around whom others orbit, from whom energy and direction flow, on whom the coherence of the group depends. Attack the group, and they will rally. Attack the source, and the group dissolves. When you face organized opposition, do not fight the army, find the general. When you face resistance within an organization, do not argue with the rank and file. Find the person behind the resistance and address or neutralize them directly. Remove the shepherd, and the sheep scatter in all directions, harmless. Law 43 of 48. Work on the hearts and minds of others. Compliance purchased by force or fear is brittle. It lasts only as long as the force is present. The moment the force relents, the moment the feared person is absent, the compliance evaporates and often transforms into active resistance. Compliance, purchased by genuine persuasion, by making people want what you want, by aligning their desires with your goals, by making your cause feel like their cause, is durable. It survives your absence. It motivates without requiring your constant supervision. It converts followers into advocates. Win the heart, and the mind will follow. Win the mind, and the heart will guard it. Law 44 of 48. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. The mirror effect has several forms, all of them profoundly disorienting to the target. In its most basic form, you simply reflect your opponent's behavior back at them, their tactics, their mannerisms, their arguments, and let them see themselves from the outside for the first time. People rarely recognize their own patterns until those patterns are mirrored back at them. At its most sophisticated, The mirror effect involves giving your opponent exactly what they claim to want, in a form that reveals the absurdity or the hidden cost of what they were asking for. This is not mockery, it is clarity. And clarity, in the game of power, is often the most devastating weapon of all. Law 45 of 48. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Change is exciting in the abstract. In practice, people are creatures of habit and comfort who find radical disruption threatening rather than invigorating. The reformer who moves too fast, who dismantles too much at once, who demands that people abandon their familiar world without adequate time to adjust, will find themselves facing resistance that feels out of proportion to the changes proposed. Move gradually. Preserve what can be preserved. Make your reforms feel like natural evolution rather than revolutionary rupture. People will accept profound changes if those changes arrive slowly enough that they feel like continuity rather than transformation. Law 46 of 48. Never appear too perfect. Perfection is the most dangerous form of provocation. The person who seems too accomplished, too capable, too consistently excellent activates the deep human tendency toward envy, and envy is one of the most destructive forces in social life. Reveal occasional, carefully chosen imperfections. Admit to minor struggles. Let people see that you are human, fallible, limited, capable of mistakes, in areas where those admissions cost you nothing essential. This disarms envy. It makes you approachable. It gives people something to feel gently superior about, which makes them comfortable in your presence rather than threatened by it. The truly powerful are not perfect. They are strategic about their imperfections. Law 47 of 48. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. Victory has a momentum that, left unchecked, will carry you past your goal and into disaster. The general who keeps advancing after the war is won will find that he has now started a new war, one in which he is the aggressor, the overreacher, the threat that must be stopped. Know when to stop. Define your victory before you pursue it, and when you have achieved what you set out to achieve, hold your position rather than pressing for more. The desire to capitalize on momentum, to squeeze out one more advantage, one more concession, one more gain, is the impulse that converts triumphs into catastrophes. History is littered with the wreckage of strategies that were working perfectly until their architects could not stop. Stop at the mark. The mark is there for a reason. Law 48 of 48. Assume formlessness. The final law is the deepest. All the preceding laws have dealt with specific tactics, specific strategies, specific approaches to power. This law transcends them all. Do not commit to a fixed form. Do not let yourself be categorized, predicted, or mapped. The moment others think they understand you completely, the moment they believe they have you figured out, you have lost the strategic advantage of mystery. Become the thing that has no permanent shape, and you become impossible to counter. Water has no shape of its own. It takes the shape of whatever contains it. Pour it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Pour it into a bowl, it becomes the bowl. Yet water, formless and adaptive, has leveled mountains and carved canyons. It defeats everything that is rigid. It is never defeated by anything. Be like water. Adapt. Evolve. Resist the comfort of fixed identity. The world changes constantly. The player who changes with it survives and thrives. The player who is too attached to a particular form, a particular strategy, a particular identity, will eventually find that the world has moved on without them. The best way to protect yourself is to be as fluid and formless as water. Never bet on stability or lasting order. Everything changes. Epilogue. The player and the played. 48 laws. 3,000 years of history. The courts of China, the palaces of Italy, the battlefields of Europe, the studios of Hollywood, the corridors of Washington. And in all of them, the same patterns, the same strategies, the same mistakes. The person who outdid their master, the friend who betrayed, the boaster who destroyed his own legend with words, the man who refused to crush his enemy and was destroyed by them years later, the reformer who moved too fast and was swept away by the backlash, the victor who could not stop and lost everything past the mark. These are not cautionary tales about evil people. Most of the people who made these mistakes were not evil. They were simply uninformed. They did not know the rules of the game they were playing, and ignorance of the rules is no protection against their consequences. Robert Greene did not write this book to make the world more cynical. He wrote it to make it more honest. Power exists. It is exercised, every day, by every person in every relationship and every institution. The only question is whether it is exercised with understanding or with ignorance. Understanding does not make you cruel. It makes you clear-eyed. And clear-eyed people throughout history have consistently been kinder, more effective, and more humane than those who stumbled through power's game with their eyes closed. You are already in the game. The only question is how well you play it. This concludes the 48 Laws of Power, an audiobook adaptation. Thank you for listening.